it going?
Yes, it's okay, thank you. Like spoke to you on the email, the reason behind this is to sort of gather more momentum and keep the work up, to be honest, because working in sport and freelancing is obviously frozen at the moment. So I'm
Yeah,
trying to create much content as I can, both with athletes and all sorts of people. So thank you very much for agreeing to this. How have you been finding lockdown?
yeah, not too bad. We just got a bit of light coming in here. These blinds are good, but they don't block all the light, and then it's getting the backdrops of the biggest decision of the day, isn't it? When you're doing these Zoom things now, it seems, and getting the framing and all that kind of. Yeah, not too bad. Still busy, and like you say, it's difficult with budgets and things, and people don't want to spend any money at the moment, do they? With things being locked down and stuff, so just trying to plug away, and probably the same as yourself, make networks and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, still got stuff to do. Probably not as much money to be made from it, but yeah, trying to keep busy.
Yeah, let's start off by talking about the recent Kofi Kingston interview. How did that go?
Yeah, that was great. It's really good talking to a lot of the WWE guys, especially when they've done a lot of interviews before, because they make your job really easy. The kind of interviews you want are the ones where you ask a quick question and then they talk for 5 minutes. And he's very good at all that. He's very interesting as well. So, yeah, I like talking to some of the ones that are well media trained. And he's in Texas. So, yeah, it all went off pretty well, actually.
Has it been easier or harder to get hold of top level athletes because of the lockdown?
It's hard to say, really. I mean, from my point of view, I'm quite lucky. I get approached to do interviews, so um, I haven't really, over the last few weeks, I haven't really been attempting to contact people. I don't think it would make a lot of difference, though. If anything, it might make it a bit easier because with a lot of them being at home, the schedules aren't as busy as maybe they would be, and particularly with athletes, if they're out training and at the gym and that kind of thing. Now they're home with lots of free time on their hands, so their agents are probably busy trying to get them work and get them in different magazines. And I know some of them are doing a lot more interviews on Sky News and things like that than they might normally have done. So I don't think it's caused a problem with getting hold of the interviews, but it's maybe caused a problem with getting the interviews in the publications, because it's the publications that have slowed down, like the websites and the magazines and that kind of thing.
For the purpose of this, could you just go over what you spoke about with Kofi Kingston?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, I don't know how familiar you are with WWE, but he's quite a legend in
Yeah.
those fields. He's been going for about 15 years. He's former world champion in WWE, which is great. He's part of the New Day tag team, which is a fun tag team that's very popular. And he works alongside WWE, he also works with the NSPCC. And they had an initiative where they built a section of their website which is aimed at families during lockdown and things that they can do, and educational tools and mental health, resources and all that kind of thing. So he was very much on that interview. He was there for the purposes of getting the message out about the NSPCC. So what we did is we talked to him about how he's finding lockdown, because he's obviously a guy who's on the road maybe 250 days a year. He doesn't see his family as much as most people, even other athletes. I mean, WWE don't have an off season. They're touring all year round. They're in hotels probably 3-4 nights a week, and they maybe get back at the weekend or just for a couple of days in the week, depending on what schedule they're on. So he's had to adapt to being back home and being dad and being amongst his kids and his wife and doing chores around the house. And that was quite fun. You know, he's painting the tree house and all that kind of stuff. So you got a real different side of what they're doing, you know, rather than being on TV as superheroes. They're actually integrating back into the family. So yeah, that was a good chat. Enjoyed it.
Have you spoken to any other wrestlers in the meantime as well?
Yeah, we talked to, let me try and think, Charlotte Flair we had a chat with,
Yeah.
who she was interesting because she was saying about how not having a crowd has made them really miss the live audience, and even they're wondering if maybe they took them for granted a bit because those crowds are just there every night. So now that they're not there, it's a big thing, and they're missing the audience. So that was interesting. I've probably spoken to a couple of other people in between and written a few different things up, but generally everybody's just trying to, especially with WWE and a lot of athletes, and like I say, they're not at the gym, so they might as well be doing interviews and keeping themselves busy that way.
Is that a sport that cannot go behind closed doors, meaning the wrestling cannot work without a crowd?
Yeah, it's been really funny. I mean, of all the sports, WWE is probably the only one that hasn't stopped. Sports entertainment or however you view it, but they have put on a brand new show with new matches every week since this whole thing began. So they even put WrestleMania behind closed doors at their training center, the performance center in Orlando, which is there really for training young wrestlers, became a TV studio. They were supposed to have WrestleMania in Tampa in front of probably 80,000 people. But they moved it and they filmed it over 2 nights and there was absolutely no audience whatsoever. But they actually did make it work. It's pro wrestling needs an audience. You need boos and cheers. Never going to be the same without a crowd reaction. But I think they're doing about the best you could possibly do under the circumstances, and they have kept rolling. So, yeah, other sports have completely stopped, but I don't know what it would take for WWE to stop. They just keep motoring on.
Could you talk a little bit about yourself? You used to be a pro wrestler yourself.
Yeah, I was a big pro wrestling fan. So as a teenager, I went down to Kent, down south, where they had one of the few wrestling schools. Exactly.
Whereabouts in Kent was it? Sorry to interrupt, because I'm from
No, feel free. There's been a few places. Is it Dymchurch down in Kent?
Yes,
well, that's where the first wrestling school was. So
really?
97, something like that, was my first trip down there. It's about a 4-hour drive from the Midlands where I am. And then later in Ashford and different places, Maidstone. And so I trained down there every week. I used to make that drive with a friend who came from Sheffield, and he used to pick me up on the way, so he had an even longer drive. But now there's wrestling schools everywhere because it's so popular. But back then, if you found one, you had to go wherever it was, and it just so happened that it was down there in Kent. But I had my first match in '98 and did quite a bit in the UK, and all was going well. And it wasn't like it is now, where there's a lot of English people that get signed up. Back then, maybe one every few years would get signed up. So there was never any big hopes of making it big or anything like that. We just used to really enjoy doing it. But I did do a tryout with WWE in 2005, something like that, and had tryouts with TNA and wrestled in the States and all this kind of stuff. So that was all really cool. But then you're getting older and older, and you've got housing and mortgages and stuff like that. And so I just took the decision that as my business was growing and I was getting a degree on that side and all the rest of it, that probably as I was getting past 30 and all the rest of it, it'd probably make more sense to start writing about wrestling rather than getting beaten up all the time. So now that I'm about 40, I think that was probably a good decision. I can still walk. So I moved on to writing, and able to start by using a lot of the friends I'd met when I was on the wrestling scene, and then gradually working for bigger and bigger publications and Muscle and Fitness in the States and the Mirror and different publications. And now I really enjoy writing about it, but I feel like I can talk to wrestlers on a health and fitness level and talk about what motivates them, rather than maybe a lot of the wrestling journalists who are fans who just want to talk about storylines and the intricacies of what may or may not have happened that their wrestlers probably aren't as fired up to talk about. So I always find that helps. That's how it's grown, really.
Do you think that makes you a more educated journalist by having been there, even though you've not been at the world stage, but being in the ring in itself makes you more educated to then write about it later on?
Yeah, I think so. I think you understand what motivates people a bit more and maybe what's important to them. And you also understand some of the insecurities that they've got. And so you might avoid certain issues. And I don't take any fun really out of criticising people just for the sake of criticising them. Whereas I guess if you want to say geeky journalists who really want to focus on minuscule points, are really only doing it for their own benefit. They're not doing it for the reader or even the talent that they're interviewing. So I find that if you can find something that they're interested in, talk to them on their level. And luckily, they're all interested in health and fitness, and particularly with Muscle and Fitness magazine, and they all grew up idolising Arnie and all that kind of stuff. So it's good to come in at that angle rather than asking them what happened like 4 years ago in a match that they might not even necessarily remember.
Who's the biggest WWE wrestler that now knows that you used to be a wrestler?
The WWE champion, Drew McIntyre, wrestled on shows back in the day, you know, when I was out there in the late 90s and stuff. So we were probably in Rumbles and that kind of thing. But I mean, he always looked fantastic. And see, I never committed myself full time to it. I was either always at university or I was trying to balance it with another job. I mean, there were times where I'd work full time, leave work on a Thursday, maybe fly. I had a match one time in Texas on a Saturday and Sunday, and then I was back at work on the Tuesday, you know, feeling sore and wondering if it ever happened. So it was always that thing of, do you commit yourself 100% to it? And I never did. So I'm quite all right with where I am, but I'm also all right with where people like Drew are, because he did commit himself 100%, and he went to the States and he did that thing where you wrestle all around the country for 25 quid a match, and you travel in the back of the van with the ring itself and maybe 5 other wrestlers and all that kind of stuff. So there's quite a few guys out there that fortunately will remember me one way or another. When I interview them, sometimes they might ask me, you know, quick, you that guy, yeah. So, but I'm very much there as a journalist, so I try and keep that part separate, because it's not part of their story or part of the story that you're interviewing about. And plus, it's about, you know, it's a good almost 10 years since I was wrestling, so it feels like such a long time away, and I've had such a good experience writing about it that it almost feels like 2 different people now. But yeah, there are those moments where people will ask you. It's quite nice actually to be remembered, you know, all these years later. But it's also great to see that there is that route, especially now. There's such a route that wrestlers can take with the NXT UK brand, if you're aware of that, you know, and there's probably 20, 30 people.
The one in Nottingham that I went to, I cannot remember the name of it though. It was like it was at the Harvey Hand Leisure Centre in Nottingham, and interviewed a couple of fighters there, and they even travelled from America. But that's another question I was going to ask. Do you go to the British shows, not just WWE, but the local shows?
Not as much, no. I mean, I used to go a lot, you know, I used to go every week. So it's kind of like, if I go, it feels like I'm working. So I'd be watching the matches and almost wanting to critique them, or I'd want to write it up, or like you say, you'd want to do interviews. So it's not really a recreational thing for me anymore, having spent so much time all around the country doing it. But it's always good to see the posters out there and see that it's still going on and thriving, which it was, you know, it was very popular in the UK. In the smaller group.
Moving on from wrestling talk, we're going to go back onto that, but I just want to give a generic questions and stuff about what's going on in the country. So without a vaccine, what will this change to working life? Will we have more time at home? You know, what's going to happen now we haven't got a vaccine? Because a lot of people will say, well, how are we going to get back to normality without a vaccine? Because it's still going to be there whether we're in lockdown for however long.
Yeah, no, it's hard to say, isn't it? I mean, we're all kind of trying to figure it out as we go along, really. It's one of those crystal ball situations, but we've all got a bit more time on our hands, so we're all trying to speculate, aren't we? But I mean, I think that you have to kind of look at it that the vaccine might not come, because if it's going to come in a year's time or whatever, no one can wait around for a year, and the economy just can't take it, and no one can sit at home for a year. So let's hope that vaccine comes. But I think it's all going to be about the testing and making sure that people that are doing things are clear of it, so that the virus isn't spreading. And I think if it would teach people anything, it's that meetings aren't always that necessary face-to-face. You know, we're doing this now on Zoom, and I talk to people all the time on email. You know, I've got people that I work with in America and Australia. We don't meet up every time we need to talk about a job or a project. So we email each other and we chat. So I think that might be a good thing for the environment as well, that people will not be jumping in the cars, driving everywhere all the time. From product productivity levels. I mean, I don't know about you, but some of these afternoon meetings seem to go on forever and nothing ever really gets decided, you know. And at the end of it, people will say, oh, I'll email you that when I've got the info. And you think, well, why didn't you just email me in the first place? So I think people will definitely look on essential business and essential travel a lot more. Whether that will be a long-term thing and then we'll just slowly slip back into things, I don't know. But that's how I see it anyway.
And also then, as another generic question, how do you feel the government has handled the situation?
So yeah, difficult. I mean, not wanting to get too political on it and come down too strongly on either side. But I mean, from what we know, I mean, we faced challenges because it sounded like the information was slow coming out of China in the first place as to what exactly we were dealing with, and maybe we lost a couple of weeks on realising just the scale of it, and people leaving China with the virus and going all over the world didn't help everyone. But then on the flip side, I think we had ample time to do things at our end and close borders on our end. We were looking at Italy and all the problems that they were having there, and it was coming all the way over to us, and all the way we were just kind of observing it and saying, oh, why is it so bad there, you know? And a few weeks later we're like, we've overtaken them because we didn't really implement things when we maybe could have. So I think it's more about, we can't go back and change things, but learning lessons now about this could well happen again, and if it does happen again, we need to act sooner, even if it means we were all stuck at home and can't catch a flight. It's got to be better than the whole country going into lockdown and every bar and restaurant and hotel in the UK closing. So I think times will change, and I hope we don't see any more of these viruses, but I think if we do, we've got to be a bit more rigid about it. And I don't know about you, but I think people have really accepted this lockdown a lot easier than maybe governments thought that we would, and maybe that's why they held off. Maybe they thought we would ignore it anyway, but if anything, we're kind of now frightened to go out, and we're saying, is it too quick to open beaches and parks and things like that? So without a vaccine as well, it's all about control, isn't it? How do we control that spread? And most of us, I know we see things on the news where they're all gathering in parks and clapping on bridges and all of that, but I think for the most part we're all pretty sensible. But yeah, how we've handled it, I don't think anybody's handled it particularly well, perhaps with like exception of Germany and Australia and places like that who acted quicker. And it showed that the quicker you act, the less people get infected and the less overall infections you have. So maybe if there's any lessons that we need to learn, it's that we allowed it to spread too far before we started to lock things down. And now, yes, things are coming down, but they're coming down from a big height rather than quelling it as it happened. That's probably how I see it.
In terms of coming out of lockdown then and going back to WWE, is there any talk about when that will resume? Because obviously you've mentioned they travel all over the States of America, let alone the shows they've done in this country and around Europe.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been looking at, and not just wrestling, like if you look at musical acts and concerts who were cancelling their concerts at different arenas, they were rescheduling for October, which you kind of thought, well, did they know something that we didn't know, or is it just an insurance thing where they have to reschedule a date and they just can't cancel it? I don't know. I know WWE had dates over here which were cancelled, and I think in Africa as well, and they're kind of being rescheduled. As to whether or not the rescheduled date will happen is another thing. As we said before, pro wrestling just will not work without a crowd, really. I mean, what they've done has been exceptional. The product that they've put on, the TV production that they've done, you still get the music and the entrances and the storylines, and they're really trying as best they can. But they are desperate to get a crowd back because they know that it's essential to their product. But then the opposition they've got is that the different mayors of the different cities in the States aren't opening up arenas. So when they do start to open up arenas, it's possible that they might have a 5-seat gap, you know, between each seat, so that you get like a quarter of an arena full in the first place. And then in 6 months' time, maybe they phase it into it being full. So I think all those things are being worked out. I know WWE are probably looking at other stages and sets and closed areas that maybe they can have a controlled audience. because you've got to have some kind of an audience. You can't just have it flat every single week. How they're going to get around it, I'm not too sure. But the States does seem to be opening up a lot more than we do. So very well could be within the next couple of months that things are a lot more acceptable over there than maybe they are here.
Obviously, I don't know how much of a football fan you are, but the Bundesliga did resume at the weekend. And even that without a crowd was not really the same. It was just an awkward and weird atmosphere. It just looked like a training game. And obviously, as I've spoken to you before, I'm from a boxing background. I don't believe boxing could really work without a crowd. Some fighters perform better with that sort of jibe and those sort of reactions from the crowd. So I don't know. It's just different, really. I can't see it happening with boxing.
I know what you mean. I suppose that the difficulty is that there's still money to be made with the sports on pay-per-view and that kind of thing. So if they shut the sport down completely, they're cutting off their revenue stream. So that's why WWE, who has a contract to produce weekly television, if they stop producing it, they lose the money. So people complain and say, well, why are they putting on shows? But because it really is the future of the company at stake if they don't. And so a lot of the sports are having to see it the same way, that they're having to get that money in somehow. And whether that means operating on a closed set, they might be able to generate pay-per-view buys that way. I agree with you. I don't think it'll ever be the same without a crowd. Now, whether or not they'll start putting a video wall behind the ring, with like a simulated crowd, or even maybe people on webcams, like us, like thousands of webcams they could do. I think they're looking into all that stuff. But yeah, I agree. I think they will do it, because I don't think those sports will just cease to run, in for the next year or two. They just can't. But at the same time, it isn't the same without a crowd, isn't? You're right.
With professional, the things I want to talk about as well, amateur sport, would that have to be, is there less or more problems with amateur sport regaining and starting again? Because they haven't got the testing at amateur sport. I work for England Boxing, the amateur boxing side of it, and they have no testing whatsoever. You have about 500 participants in either a leisure centre or an arena, and you're just as likely to have a spike in that event just as you are in a professional event. So, yeah, do you think amateur sport and grassroots sport will be less or more likely to continue?
Yeah, I think it could face some problems. I really hope it doesn't, because I get involved with young people's club in Coventry, called Coventry Boys and Girls Club. They have a boxing club which is getting on for 100 years old. It's one of the oldest boxing clubs in Coventry, and they have university students from the Coventry Uni who come across, because it is a proper full-size professional boxing ring. They've got great kit, great teachers, coaches that work with Team GB and different Sport England and different places come over. But the difficulty is that they always say that money trickles down from the top. So if the top promotions are struggling, then they're not going to be able to trickle that money down. You've then got the fact that they've got the best part of the year where these young people aren't training now. So does that affect their future? Yeah. Will they be elite athletes against someone who's maybe a year older than them? Or I don't know how it would work. I suppose it depends on the athlete, but will they move on to something else because they were interested in it in the beginning, but after 6 months of lockdown, maybe they've gone into something else? So I think it could affect the numbers of amateur sport, but at the same time, once the lockdown is lifted, people will want to get out and they'll want to do sporty stuff again. So it's probably going to be a temporary thing, maybe that will last a few years. But financially, when you think about people in amateur sports who are applying for funding, maybe for equipment or to charitable organisations, they're going to struggle, because those budgets are going to be non-existent for extra equipment and things like that, because they're dealing with, as you say, extra money you've got to spend on testing, and social distancing is going to mean that buildings are going to have to be renovated or reconfigured to work with however they want to do the training. So yeah, I think it's going to be a big challenge for grassroots sport. I hope, I know it will get through eventually, as these things always do, but over the next few years I can see it being a real uphill struggle.
you mentioned Coventry Boys and Girls Boxing Club. Could you talk about what you personally do there?
Yeah, so I work as well as doing writing and content.
Yeah.
I do loads of different media stuff. So I do web development, but I also do a lot of marketing, and I really work at Coventry Boys and Girls Club under a marketing capacity on a subsidised rate because they're a charity, and it's really nice to get involved with them. There's a youth club side of it, and as I say, it's one of the oldest youth groups in Coventry. But they also have a separate boxing club. Which is kind of worked in and of itself, not necessarily part of the youth club, that has some really decent lads there, different boxers and girls as well. And although I'm not a coach there, I love to go and kind of hang around and see what's going on. And I've talked to the coaches at Coventry Uni who love to come over just because they've got better equipment at Coventry Boys and Girls Club than they actually have at the uni itself. So that is the official training centre, really, of Coventry Uni's boxing club, which is a decent club. You know, they've won different medals and things. And my vision really is to get it more well known. But my vision is also that we could be doing tournaments and. Got you. Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, got you. I was rattling away, and then I just noticed that it had frozen on your side. I was like, oh, how much of that has he actually heard?
I got up until the annual competition you were on about.
Yeah, so obviously the big vision was that now that, see, the club itself used to be in a very old dilapidated building, and Coventry Uni expanded, and they, through a different deal that they did, they put the club into a brand new building, which the club now owns, which is shiny new 3-story building, and its own floor is the boxing floor, really. So not only that, but they've got a full-size sports hall, you know, so it lends itself very well to either moving the boxing ring into the sports hall or using the boxing floor and having an event there. You know, it could be done no problem, really. So whether they had a tournament or an exhibition, I'm not sure. It's all really in the brainstorming stages. But yeah, that would be the next hope, would be to expand the club from not just being a training centre, but somewhere that actually puts on, you know, quarterly or annual shows maybe.
Is there any personal stories of people you've met and that have changed dramatically while participating at the Coventry Boys and Girls Club?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I'm just talking fairly general terms because I noticed the same thing happening, really, and that is from the time that I've spent there, I've noticed that, I mean, first of all, Coventry has got quite a high knife crime rate, but it's not on its own on that score. You know, it's sort of a problem all over the country. But one of the main things about these youth clubs, and it sounds cliched, but it really is getting people off the street, because when people are on the street and they're hanging around in parks, that's where they're meeting people that are a bit older than them who start sucking them into these gangs and then getting them to do things that they otherwise wouldn't have done. And the same with guys preying on vulnerable young women and all of that kind of stuff. Whereas once they get into a structured youth club that's indoors and supervised and it's still fun, and they have pool tables and play games and have music on, do the rest of it, they can be kids more, you know. So being kids and being young and not being sucked into that street life is really important. The other thing I've noticed is schools. You know, as much as schools do their best, a lot of kids fall through the cracks at school, and for whatever reason they don't like it, or they don't get on with a particular teacher, or maybe things are going off in the family and they just stop going to school whatsoever. But the club offers media lessons and photography lessons, and as I say, we do sports and dodgeball, and you'll have kids there who don't attend school, but they're never late for a youth club session. And it's amazing that it just goes to show, you know, if you can inspire them and find something that they're interested in, or if they have a connection with a particular youth leader who's into maybe, you know, it could be rap music or it could be photography, it gives them a reason to come, and it connects on their level. So I think the youth clubs are really important because what they do is they catch kids that are starting to slip through the cracks, and no one should ever really fall through the cracks. That's how I look at it.
What's the age range of the people that go to this club?
Yeah, it's quite good range. So probably from about 6 or 7 years old all the way up till young adults. They're obviously different groups and on at different times, but it means you get to see a good cross section. And there may be brothers and sisters that are a bit older or younger than each other, and they're in the different groups. So you see families come in as well. We started doing last year. We started doing an awards ceremony where we awarded people for achievements, whether it be in media or video editing, or then there were just some fun awards, just to make it light-hearted. But that was really good because, again, people say, oh, parents really aren't interested in their kids. But we had loads of parent engagement and family engagement. So there's a good age range. And our challenge is really just to get people to understand that's that. I mean, this particular club, Coventry Boys and Girls Club, they charge £1 entry, and they'll even pick you up in a bus. I mean, they're not making any money out of this at all. By the time they've paid for the staff and the petrol for the bus, and then the keeping the lights and the electric on, and even giving out squash and all the rest of it that they do, it's an amazing charity, and they should be really celebrated for. And in fact, the mayor of Coventry did help open the new building. So it is an established club, but it's just that challenge of making people aware of it and building links with schools and the media and other clubs. And because it's sad to think that kids in Coventry might not know it's there because it's so accessible to them.
Is there a social media page which people can look at and discover all the fundamental work that you guys do at that club?
Yeah, so if you go on any of the social medias, really, Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, Coventry Boys and Girls Club, you'll find us. If you Google Coventry Boys and Girls Club, you'll find our website, which has obviously the timetable is not really existent at the moment because we're closed, but at the same time, you will find out about what we do, and all the contact details are on there. If you follow us on Facebook and all of that kind of thing, you'll get to know about when we start to reopen and all of that kind of thing. The other thing is that although we're closed, we've been doing virtual classes. So one of the guys has been doing a fitness class once a week, and they have been doing media training by video, and I've been helping to post about an open mic competition that we're doing where people can send in an original song that they've recorded from home, and there's prizes to win there. So yeah, we are closed, but we're trying to still reach out and let people know that they can pass the time with us, at least till we open, which hopefully won't be too much further away.
How important is those virtual sessions to keep that institution going, that charitable work that you do going? How important is that?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think kids love routine. They might not admit it, but if you do something once a week, they'll look forward to it. If it's something that they're into, they'll look forward to it. I know that we get private messages on a Thursday when we do the fitness club, and they're just checking in the morning. Are you doing the club? Are you doing the club? So it just shows you that you're putting something out there that's relevant and that people like. It makes it all worthwhile, really. But yeah, people have got quite a bit of choice on what to do during lockdown. It's good to see there's a lot of virtual stuff out there, but at least we can have a local feel with our kids, and we're getting some good engagement. So it's a great feeling, yeah.
Yeah, just keeping up that conversations between kids that attend that youth club is obviously very important. Just to sort of end the conversation, really, moving on from that, what does the future hold for you then?
Yeah.
That question, but...
Great question. I've been mulling it over myself the last few weeks, because it does make you take stock. I mean, do you try and keep doing the same things that you're doing, or do you use maybe a bit of extra time that you've got to look into other things? I mean, I've thought about doing podcasts and things like that. My only concern about podcast is that once you start it, it's going to take over your life, because you're going to have to do it every week, and I'm up for it, but then I'm just a bit concerned about having a busy week where maybe it's not the right quality and all of that kind of stuff. So maybe something like that. I've got quite an archive of interviews that I've done over the years where maybe I've only used a section of the interview, or maybe we've interviewed, say, 5 people, but we've only done a story on one of the people that we've interviewed, because it's the way it goes sometimes. So it would be probably easy just to open a YouTube channel and upload some of that archive. So that's an idea. But from my point of view, I mean, people are still training in lockdown. People are adapting, and their nutrition's adapting and the way that they're training outside and in the gardens. And I've bought a bike, you know, I've not ridden a bicycle in years, and I'm out there doing it. So there's still plenty of stuff to write about on that front, and the health and fitness level. And the WWE just never stops, so there's always plenty of content there. So for the most part, things are carrying on as normal, but just with an eye on waiting to see if anything changes, you know, over the next few weeks.
Well, yeah, thank you very much for talking to me, and thank you very much for giving up your time to talk to me through all these different issues and that. So, yeah, please stay safe, and hopefully we'll talk once again in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Well, keep in touch. I mean, hopefully there's something there that's of interest, but we'll chat when we start to reopen, and maybe we can look at the boxing. Maybe you can give me some advice, if nothing else, on the best way of approaching that kind of thing. But yeah, all the best, and hopefully speak soon.